We're going to talk about leveraging. Um, and, I think the title may have implied how to further leverage real estate assets that you own. But, I think we wanted to point out that leveraging, period, once you own a real estate asset, you have the ability to leverage. And that means so much to building wealth. Um, and in us talking about it, which obviously we pick these topics, we talk about it, we talk about how we're going to present them to to people. And in some cases, like the LA market, it's so expensive. People go out and buy in other areas and keep as rental, and or Airbnb and use it as a vacation place. This is leveraging, no different than buying a home that you live in on your own. It's doing the same thing. For a smaller investment, you're getting 100% of the return. And sometimes that's a stepping stone to wherever you want to go, another property, or maybe that means after you gain some equity there, buying in the city. Who knows?
Yep. Well, I'm glad you pointed that out because, it was a very catchy title for the email. Certainly a catchy one here as we talk about it. But yeah, it can come from some very humble beginnings and some very practical ones. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yes.
So, okay, well, we took this from a great site, Investopedia.com, and the title is How to Increase Your Real Estate Net Worth with Leveraging. So, and Darren, just stop me when you want to make a point.
I want to make one more quick comment before
Yeah.
you. Sorry about that, Joe. Every client we've ever worked with, we always talk about a purchase of a home. And this is an owner-occupant home, as to serve two purposes. Number one is to be a space where they're going to enjoy being. It's got to emotionally support them, be a good neighborhood that they feel good about. But number two is to be a good financial investment. And those are the two categories to look at when you purchase, particularly to occupy. And in reality, depending on who you are, maybe you'll lean more towards one or the other. That's your choice. We feel it's our job as agents to point out those are the two components you should always keep in mind. And we'll evaluate and try to dive deep into both of those topics when someone's considering a purchase.
Right. So investing in real estate has become a popular way to diversify your investment portfolio. Everywhere we look, we're constantly reminded of the benefits of buying property, from the many infomercials about real estate seminars or the home shows that tout the incredible value of managing or flipping rental properties. But it isn't that easy. After all, buying a rental property isn't like investing in stocks. You can't just put down a little here and there and become a property owner. You need capital to make that purchase, and the process can often be long and drawn out, not to mention all the risks involved, especially if you don't do your research. But is there a way to get into the market by increasing your net worth? Try using leverage to your advantage. By doing this, you can put little to no money down and use debt to help you realize a return.
Right?
Darren, you want to unpack some of that?
Sure. So obviously real estate is a unique product in that you can invest a fraction of the cost of the real estate asset and reap 100% of the gains that come from that. And that's the power of leveraging. It's harder these days to buy something with less down, particularly when it's a highly competitive market. Maybe somebody, always hear about, oh, I was beat out by cash. It doesn't have to be cash. Once you get over 20%, you probably have a little more skin in the game and it improves your odds. But we've clearly had offers accepted at substantially lower down payments. But the lower the down payment, the more you're leveraging, meaning that, you've invested less, you've kept more capital, or that's all the capital you have, but you can still get in the game. And over time, you're set up to gain 100% of the rewards.
Right. And would you say there is any other opportunity like this in terms of leverage?
None that I know of. This is why so many people move towards real estate. I mean, we break down real estate, and this helps some people. So I'm glad this came up. Your payment in real estate is a combination, but a part of it is a forced savings, right? You're required to pay down your principal balance. That's basically You borrowed money, but you're paying down the money that you borrowed, so you owe less. It's forcing you to save that money. You pay interest, which is tax deductible. You get a benefit there. And then if you own, if it's an investment category at all, either a portion of it that you may live in or the entire thing, all costs associated with it are tax deductible, including the taxes, the insurance, repairs, etc., etc. And this is why people build wealth through real estate. This is why the sacrifice you make on the front end, which is daunting, is worth it to get in the door.
Okay, so continuing, read on to learn more about how you can use leverage to increase your real estate's net worth, as well as some of the risks involved. And if you are following along, guys, I did put in the link, and you can read along with us the story. So, key takeaways: leverage uses borrowed capital or debt to increase the potential return of an investment. In real estate, the most common way to leverage your investment is with your own money or through a mortgage. Leverage works to your advantage when real estate values rise, but it can also lead to losses if values decline. Avoid leveraging risks by making sound investment decisions and accounting for mortgage payments, vacancies, and a tough economy. What is leverage? Leverage is the use of various financial instruments or borrowed capital, in other words, debt, to increase the potential return of an investment. It commonly used on both Wall Street and Main Street when talking about the real estate market. Leverage is a technique used by both people and companies to expand the potential for returns, while equally expanding the downside of any risks involved if things don't work out. While the potential for a good return is possible, like when real estate prices rise, using leverage can be a double-edged sword. That's because it can also lead to losses if the investment moves in the opposite direction. In the case of real estate prices, losses happen when prices decline. Ways to access leverage. The easiest way to access leverage is to use your own money. In the case of a mortgage, a standard 20% down payment gets you 100% of the house in which you want to live. Some financing programs let you put even less money down. If you purchase the property as an investment, you may be in a position where your partners furnish some or even all of the money. Similarly, some sellers may be willing to finance some of the purchase price of the property they wish to sell. Under such an arrangement, you can purchase a property with little money down, and in some cases, no money down at all. Anything there, Darren?
Sure. So they say 20%. That's kind of been the standard for years, and until, maybe it was 30, 35 years ago, that was the only way to get into real estate. But there are programs, as they mentioned, that are substantially less down, 3.5% down, VA loans, which are 100% down, which we recently closed one on, which is not an easy thing to do, but we did. So you have more leverage there. With more leverage, once you go less than 20% down, there's some more risk on the other side, on the lending side, and you do pay a little more. And a common dynamic there is, you pay mortgage insurance and or potentially a slightly higher rate. Often it's not a higher rate, but that's possible. Is that you want to, over time, try to build equity and move beyond that loan to eliminate the additional costs associated with a lesser down loan.
So, example of leveraging. Consider the common real estate purchase requirement of a 20% down payment. That's $100,000 on a $500,000 property. By putting down only 20% of the money down and borrowing the rest, the buyer essentially uses a relatively small percentage of their own funds to make the purchase. The majority, therefore, is provided by a lender. That's why real estate investors often refer to the remaining 80% of the purchase price as other people's money. Let's assume the property appreciates at a rate of 5% per year. This means the borrower's net worth grows to $525,000 in just 12 months. Comparing this gain to the gain from a purchase made outright without any loan highlights the value of the leveraging strategy. For example, the same borrower could have used the 100% to make a paid-in-full purchase of a 100% property. Assuming the same 5% rate of appreciation, the buyer's net worth from the purchase on an all-cash 100,000 property would increase 5,000 over the course of 12 months versus 25,000 for the more expensive property. The 20,000 difference demonstrates the potential net worth increase provided through the use of leverage. Now, picture that 5% gain every year for 20 years. Over time, the use of leverage can have a very significant and very positive impact on your net worth. Anything there, Darren?
I bought my first property at 24 years old and bought it and went on with life. And I wasn't thinking about whether I was gaining equity or this or that. But sometimes I was just living there. And at some point in time, though, you wake up and you're like, wow, look at that. I have a ton of equity. I have a lot more options in life now. So it compounds over time. And another factor to consider, which is one of the reasons there are so many people shifting money into real estate in the last few years. Not that it hasn't been going on previous to that, but it's accelerated. It's because there's expected inflation in the future, and real estate is also a hedge against inflation, meaning that you get a fixed price at a fixed rate, and as inflation rises, what you're paying doesn't change.
Right. All right, the dangers of leverage. Now for the bad news. All this sounds great, but there's a downside. Leverage can work against you just as much as it can work in your favor. To show how, let's revisit our earlier example. If you use a 100% down payment to purchase a $500,000 home, and real estate prices in your area decline consecutively for several years, leveraging works in reverse. After year one, your $500,000 property would be worth $475,000 if it depreciates by 5%. If prices continue on that same trajectory, soon your property could be worth $451,250, a loss in equity of $48,750. Important. Just as leverage can work in your favor, it can also work against you. Under that same 5% price decline scenario, if that $100,000 was used for an all-cash purchase of a $100,000 home, the buyer would have lost just $5,000. The first year, home prices fell, much less than that more expensive home. In real estate markets where prices fall significantly, homeowners can end up owing more money than the house is actually worth. For investors, declining prices can reduce or even eliminate profits. If rents fall too, the result can be a property that cannot be rented at a price that will cover the cost of the mortgage and other expenses. If you are contemplating becoming a landlord, there are many factors to consider.
Right. So two different categories there. Certainly the owner-occupant and the landlord, strictly an investment scenario. From an owner-occupant scenario, in reality, in the big downturn that we've experienced, the '07 crash, those who put down less money benefited more because if they were walking away because there were big declines at that time, they just lost less money. And the way the economy responded at that time, because it was such a huge event, was to make it easier for those individuals to work their way out of real estate, their negative assets. In the end, it worked out quite well for the banks who took those assets back, even at a loss at that time. So there was some win on the front end that was forced by government, and then a win on the back end by the investors who took that loss but played the long game, and they could win the long game for sure. So does a market turn? Sure it does. One of the things that works against a market turning is inflation. Our government tries for a 2 to 3% inflation. We haven't had a lot of inflation in the last decade. But if they're continually seeking inflation, that's going to move prices up without any effort. It's not even a matter of a neighborhood improving. This is why you go back 40 years and you're like, really, that person bought the house for $50,000 that's now worth $2 million. A lot of that is inflation. It doesn't have anything to do with the area. This is why getting into real estate now pre-inflationary environment is even more important, which is why real estate is so hot. Other than that, obviously in LA, we've had a market that's been appreciating for a long time, a dynamic city that's changing. There are things that could happen in cities that might rely on a single industry for a job source, or if big jobs leave areas and wages decline. That's probably the most likely way values would go down. But when it's a broader component, government often might have some interjection to help ease the burden on the negative side.
All right, cons leveraging many properties. The problems get even bigger when multiple units are involved, as commercial real estate investors often put down as little money as possible. The goal is to leverage your money by taking control of 100% of the assets while only putting down 20% of the value. Consider the $500,000 in our previous example, only let's say it's a small apartment building. Since it was purchased with $100,000 as a down payment, if the value of the building declines by 30%, the property is worth just $350,000. But the investors still must pay interest and principal on the full value of the $400,000 loan. Should the amount of the investors get in rent, the investor gets in rent decline too, the result could be default on the property. If the investor uses cash flow from that property to pay the mortgage on other properties, the loss of income could produce a domino effect that can end with an entire portfolio in foreclosure over one bad loan on one property.
Right. I will say this, if there's fluctuation on the investment side of things, again, a portion of your, even if your rent isn't covering your entire payment, a portion of your payment is your forced savings. You're just paying down your own debt. So that's money you're still keeping. And then if you take a loss, that loss on that investment property can offset your personal income, assuming that's not your only source of income. So even in years, and we famously heard about this from our past president, and a loss that carried over for a decade. It was such a huge loss, right? Whether you support the way the tax code's written or not, in real estate, if you take a loss, it can affect that year and future years. That loss can carry forward. So this is why commonly tax accountants will say to people, you need to go out and buy property. Even if it's a loss on the income stream. There's two components to owning investment property. There's appreciation value, where the property actually just gains more equity over time, becomes worth more, which you don't realize until you do something with. And then there's cash flow. But if you can absorb negative cash flow, it will actually help you tax-wise.
Avoiding leveraging risks. Now that you've learned about the basics of leveraging in real estate, as well as some of the pitfalls, you may think it's impossible to make a good return using this technique. Don't fret, it's just a matter of using common sense. Just like any investment, real estate comes with risk. Although you can use leverage to your advantage, there are a few key things you want to make sure you avoid to give you a better edge in the market. First, don't assume what will happen before it happens. You can't always use past performance as an indicator of what will happen in the future, especially with the housing market. If you see that property values have risen in a specific area by 5 to 10% over a certain period of time, that doesn't mean they will continue on the same path. Next, budget yourself accordingly and know that what you're getting into. If you put down a lower down payment, the amount of your loan will be higher. That means you'll have to make a larger mortgage payment. You may have to account for lower vacancy rates, a tougher economy, bad tenants, all of which will fall on you. Ultimately, you're still responsible for the mortgage payment, so you have to make sure you can keep yourself afloat in any situation. The bottom line, images of such leveraged purchases bring to mind those late-night infomercials where smooth-talking salespeople suggest that you can earn millions of dollars buying properties with no money down. While it is possible, we don't recommend doing this route. Happily, you don't need to. Less exotic ways to use leverage do exist, enabling you to buy real estate with relatively small amount of down, even no money at all. In fact, although they may not think about it as leverage, most people do so if they take out a mortgage when they buy a home. They pay back the loan over a period of years or decades while enjoying the use of the property. The moral of the story is that leverage is a common tool that works well when used prudently. And then to finish out, maximize rental income, guaranteed. Oh, that's
Yeah.
well, that's another article, but
Sure.
yeah.
So, being someone who purchased property before, I'm going back again 14 years, and navigating through the tough times in real estate typically means somebody who's a little more conservative financially. On the front end, you can throw it out there, risk a little more. It certainly is risky on every purchase. It feels that way. But having stability and being able to navigate downturns is the key to long-term success in real estate. It's probably the key to success in almost anything, having a long picture. But so I owned multi-unit buildings, which I purchased right before the crash. The values went down, but they generated income, right? I talked about appreciation and income stream. The income stream was there. I lost on appreciation for a period of time, but that recouped and the income stream improved throughout, so it worked out. So understanding that if you're doing a strictly investment property, that having some more resources to be able to navigate there will be setbacks, but in the long run, so far, it's been a profitable venture.